What's up everyone, I'm the CloakingDonkey and welcome back to my Camelot Unchained Examine series, where I look at everything that Camelot Unchained will hopefully have to offer. Now do remember that this game is not even in beta yet, so a lot of the things that I do talk about may change by the time the game comes out, because I can really only rely on the information that is out there. The purpose of this series is to give everyone a good overlook at what this game might be, because it is rather difficult to find all the information, as a lot of it is a little bit scattered. So in this here episode 6, we are still going to talk about the crafting. I started that in last episode, but I definitely didn't cover everything. I tried to cover the basics last time, but there still are a few systems that are definitely interesting enough to talk about. So first, some of you might ask yourself, with no structured PvE, how might one actually start out as a crafter? Because with crafting being an entire class, it is obviously going to need some sort of progression. Where everybody else is just going to go out and kill people, crafters are going to have to start somehow, right? So how is that going to work? Well, the earliest adopters of the game are basically just going to have regular old crafting items and work orders for their realm, as well as NPCs, which I will get to. You are going to make items for NPCs basically, hand them in, and then get a bunch of progression points, experience, however you want to call it. But down the line there will also be another system, because as a new crafter player, you're going to be able to become an apprentice to a veteran crafter player. So any veteran crafter will be able to hire a less experienced crafter as their player apprentice. And this apprentice is supposed to take over some of the more menial and basic tasks about crafting, which saves the veteran crafter some time and effort, and in exchange the apprentice will get more experience or progression points than he would get just by himself. There will also be NPC apprentices, or NPCs as I mentioned them earlier, who will basically do similar things, but they are not going to be nearly as efficient as player apprentices, which is supposed to incentivize you to actually take a newer crafter as your apprentice. And the NPC apprentices will of course also cost money. So if you want to automate some of your things, you're going to have to pay for it, and it's never going to be as effective as if you just took a newer crafter under your wing. Personally, I think this is an amazing idea and probably the best I've ever heard when it comes to making crafting more of a social experience. Having newer crafters be under the tutelage of more experienced crafters and actually making it a system and rewarding both players for this social interaction is absolutely genius. We don't know any exact specifics about what apprentices are going to do, but if you think about all of the time sink steps that I was talking about in the last video, you can probably see that apprentices are probably going to have to do with those steps, where you can automate it or have an apprentice do the work while you go out and do more advanced stuff, and both of you will gain from this relationship. Now, as we all know, when you craft items in an MMORPG, you definitely also want to sell these. There is not going to be an auction house in Camelot Unchained, or at least there's not supposed to be one. Maybe there ends up being one after all, but it was kind of part of the basic Kickstarter pitch that an auction house would not be part of the deal. The reason for this is that an auction house kind of takes a lot of the social interaction that crafting is capable of out of the game. If you think about, once again, a game like World of Warcraft or any of its derivatives, they generally don't have very much social interaction when it comes to crafting. Crafter makes his items, puts them on the auction house, somebody else comes in, buys them off the auction house, and there's really nothing that you never really have to talk to any crafters. And in a game such as Camelot Unchained, that really isn't what you want. You want people to be talking more, to foster that wonderful community sense within your realm that is going to give you realm pride and all of those cool things that are going to make you want to play for years to come. Now, instead of an auction house, players will be able to open shops. shops will not be just a welcome to the game, here's your shop kind of deal. You will have to earn your shop from the Merchants Guild. The Merchants Guild will have its own sort of leveling track, so I'm guessing they're kind of like a faction, and you're gonna give items to them, and that's gonna increase your reputation, if you will. And then at some point you will be able to receive a license for a shop. And these shops are actual physical shops that you will be able to build in commercial areas. So there will be specific commercial areas in the main cities and maybe even player-created cities where shops can be built, and shops can't be built anywhere else. This is kind of supposed to give a little bit of a hub experience where people go to these hubs and commercial districts to do their shopping and their selling, and once again to just kind of create more of a social experience within the game. This is definitely very similar to how the housing worked in Dark Age of Camelot, where housing was instanced from the rest of the world, but all of the housing was in zones. So you could find all the houses in the actual physical world. It was just that they were separate from the sort of PvE and PvP zones. And there was no central auction house. You could look up what people were selling all throughout these housing zones, but to buy the things you actually had to go to the houses, until they changed that at some point and made it really expensive to buy it at these hubs and make it cheaper if you actually went to their houses. And this system definitely seems very similar, because it is going to put you in a mindset where you're going to want to check out different merchants and maybe find some that you really like, or who have a better service than some of the others maybe, or who are nicer, and you might become a loyal customer to one merchant, and all of these sort of good, juicy social interactions. The shops themselves will also be customizable, so for anyone who buys one of these shops and builds it in a commercial district, you will be able to put your shop signs on them and customize them on the out and inside, and just make them a little home away from home, if you will. Now and then lastly, the Merchant Guild also offers caravans. Now the thing with caravans is that basically your inventory is not limited as it is in a lot of modern MMORPGs. It is limited by both space and weight, which means you will not be able to just carry around 50 sets of armor because they all take up the little space in your slotted inventory. No, every item will have a weight, and you will only have a certain carrying capacity. And that means if you want to move a large bulk of items, you're going to need a caravan. Or if you want to move a large number of siege weapons, you're also going to need a caravan or something along those lines. Caravans are going to be groups of animals and people moving through the world, and every caravan will include a giant creature. That's how City State Entertainment wants their caravans to look. They want to have some giant with a platform on his head or something like that, or a big elephant or a giant snake. Some of these artworks in the background show these big nasty worms that they came up with, or these goat creatures that carry around stuff. Now these caravans will not just be you pick up a caravan and then you move it freely to wherever. Caravans have to go from caravan stop to caravan stop. And how this exactly is going to work, we don't know yet. If those caravan stops are predetermined by the game, or if players can erect a caravan stop at a player town, whether or not a player town or a castle has to be a certain size before you can put down one of these stops. That's all things that will have to be determined. I hope that there is as much freedom to this system as possible, because it would just be kind of boring otherwise. However, the movement along these caravan lines can either be along a predetermined path that the game decides, or a caravan master can walk along a custom path. Now, I don't really know what a caravan master is, because that didn't really get explained anywhere. I haven't really seen it yet, but I'm guessing that probably has to do with having a lot of reputation or being further along the leveling track with the Merchant Guild. That probably will enable you to become a caravan master, and then you might be able to alter the route to another caravan stop to maybe avoid banditry, something like that. That's my expectation. We'll have to see how that actually turns out in the end. But yes, the point of these caravans is to make moving large amounts of items, or very large items like siege engines, dangerous, because these caravans will be attackable. So enemy faction players will be able to assault your caravans, plunder them, and take your stuff. You as a crafter moving one of these caravans will be able to buy insurance so that in case all of your stuff gets stolen or destroyed, you at least get a little bit of a compensation back from the game so that it doesn't feel entirely as horrible. But this once again also opens up the possibility for a guild, for example, to work together with their crafter and say move a large amount of items with a caravan and then move with the caravan to protect the goods from enemy faction bandits. Personally, these caravans are one of the most interesting features in Camelot Unchained for me personally, because I think they add quite some interesting meta gameplay to the game. Because if you don't have that many players online in your guild, or the group you're running around with just isn't maybe strong enough to take on other, front-up PvP groups, then you might be able to skirt around the sides, maybe have a scout, check out the different caravan routes, and then go for one of those caravans and plunder it maybe, instead of just, engaging in regular PvP. Could also be a good way for you to make some extra cash instead of going and crafting your own items or hunting for resources or any of that. You could just go and get resources from the enemy faction. Alright, and that's pretty much all the hard information I have on the crafting right now. I think the system sounds really exciting and definitely is a move back to older games that came out before World of Warcraft. It reminds me a lot of Dark of Camelot, of course. There are definitely also some Vanguard vibes in the system. There are some things that I definitely remember from Horizons, that today is called Istaria, and several other more crafting-focused games such as Star Wars Galaxies, etc, etc, etc. I'm personally really excited about this crafting system because I have to say crafting has really taken a backseat in a lot of modern MMORPGs. Even if it turns out only 50% as awesome as they pitch it, this will be a cool crafting system that I will actually be happy to spend some time with. Alright guys, that is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. In the next episode, I will be talking about sieges. Yes, the mighty keep sieges and siegecraft. That thing we all love so dearly in our more open-worldy type PvP games. But until then, I've been the CloakingDonkey, and I'll see you in another video!